What's up, nerds? Doc Brass here, coming to you guys with a new tutorial. I have a different format right now to try and give you guys some cleaner audio. So I actually have everything kind of running through the mixer and then into the computer from there. So don't mind the small little pickup if I have to put down and pick up the microphone. Let me know if you guys enjoy this kind of format more, or if you guys like the more open, where I'm just kind of ranting between everything in the previous style videos. But I thought this could be helpful anyway. So this tutorial is going to be kind of going over a topic that we went over on our group session. Figured it was a good opportunity to go over this kind of topic for other people, as well as those involved in the group session to revisit this topic, right? And that is sampling, not just in general, and we're going to go through sampling and chopping, but also sampling and chopping swing music, right? So I picked out a sample. It's the same one that we went over in the group session to keep everything nice and, consistent. And what I'm going to go through is just pick out a couple spots that I liked, and instead of listening through the whole song, and then we'll go through the chopping process, and I'll explain things as I go along. Okay, and I'll try and edit it so it's not a super long format video. So what I'm going to do first is, so I have to go through the signal flow of this, in case anyone's ever curious. The sample is off of YouTube, so I have my iPad right over here on my desk coming out of the headphone jack into the record input of the MPC, which is right over here. Then I'm coming out of the MPC into the mixer. I have my microphone also in the mixer. And then I'm coming out of the mixer into the interface, which of course is recording into the computer right now. So now that I have the iPad coming into here, I'm in my record mode on my MPC, and I'm going to go ahead and press play on the sample, and I'm going to go through and record a couple of key moments, and you guys can see. I'm going to try and make it so I do it more naturally. That way I try not to skip any steps that I might actually do, and then I'll try and explain them later appropriately. Okay? So I have my first little snapshot right here, and I'm just taking I pause the song. That way I can name the sample, and then I'm going to continue on. Sorry, if you notice some of my cables are dying, I might need to replace them. Okay, so those are the two parts that I'm really snagging here. Okay, now from here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into trim. Now, in the MPC 2500, when I hit trim, it's automatically going to go to the last thing I sampled. Okay, so what you're going to want to do is go to your sample, and here we have our first one, and then our second one. Now, the first thing that I do, and this is my best advice for to try and keep things simple and consistent across multiple samples, is that all of the edits that we're going to do to the samples, I want to do now, and then I will start chopping. So any tempo changes, any tuning, anything that I'm going to be adjusting to the sample, I want to do to both number 1 and number 2, and I want to do them right now before I chop. That way when I start chopping, I don't start noticing any inconsistencies in tonality or tempo, and I can go right into it from there, okay? So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go into here, and I'm going to be looking for what I want to have be the starting downbeat. And this is really important in swing, because in swing music, a lot of times there's a lead-up note that goes into the downbeat, and a lot of people will start wanting to use that as their downbeat when really you want to be a couple steps ahead. So, for example, in this beginning sample, you see, I actually hear the downbeat about here. And any of those extra notes that were over here, might not be super necessary, or more than likely are going to be repeated at another point along this sample line. But I want to be able to tighten up the groove here, right? Okay, so now that I trimmed up the fat, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over into, we're going to do a little tempo change. And for this, I want to bring it down. So what I will normally use is I'll use the auto detect feature on the MPC. This is saying 124.2. And what I'm then going to do is tap it out myself just to see if there's a crazy difference. See, and I'm actually tapping 125. I'm going to keep it at 125 because that's actually very even. And then I'm going to go back over to my sample, go into edit. And so now that you see that it's at 125, I want to drop this down. And I'm thinking I might even go below 120. I'm thinking like 118. Okay. Let's do it. Yeah. You see how some of those notes now are a little more boop, boop, boop. So we're going to start with that. Then, after I do the time stretch, and I'm going to take that, I'm going to now do the time stretch over here immediately. I'm not even going to think about it. Okay, I'm just going to, I got the same tempo changes, and I'm going to just, right? And I'm just going to hit over right on there. Now I'll do the same thing for the second sample, where I tighten it up, but I'll do that after I now go through, and I'm going to go do a little pitch change. Oops, sorry for the P there. A little pitch change. So for something like this, probably go down. You could go up if you have a preference. On the MPC 2500, this preset is kind of like an EQ mix. So I have a couple of my personal preferences that I use, but you don't necessarily need to worry about the preset if it's not an option that's available. Really what we're trying to do is just tune it up or down, right? I can dig that. And then we hit overwrite. And again, same thing. We go here, we go right to edit and just do it again so everything stays consistent. Overwrite. So now both of the samples that I have are now tempo changed and tuned to the same way to each other. So they're in the same key and the same tempo, right? Now I'm going to go to my second one and just kind of refine it a little bit. And then we're going to get into chopping. And again, just because it comes up here, notice that there is a small horn part right before the downbeat. And it goes wham wham and the wham. That second one is the real downbeat, right? So we don't want to start it here on the first one. And that's what a lot of people will think is the actual downbeat because it's where the next instrument starts. But in swing music, that's the lead-in, right? That's that swing. So this right here is the actual downbeat. Right? You see how that is much more timed out, easier? And then I'm going to let the whole thing play so I can kind of chop off the end where I would want it just to tighten it up. Okay, so now that we have that tightened up, what I'm now going to do is I'm going to go to my first sample, and this is where I'm going to bring up a big difference. So this is this isn't about the process. This is about how some people might choose to do make their beat. If you are doing live finger drumming like me, what you are going to be essentially trying to do is you're going to have one program, right, where you have your drums and your samples on one program. Now, if you're sequencing, you can actually just make your sample a separate program and chop out in the same way. And then on track number 1, you could have your sample program, and then on track number 2, you could have your drum program, and that's how you can then sequence it out. The way that in my process that we'll be going over today, is that all of the trimming that we'll be doing and all of the chopping will be assigned to the program. So I already have my basic kit loaded. This is a kind of some of my go-to sounds: kick, snare, little clap, right? Some ghost note snares. And so when it comes down to now getting into the chopping phase for me, I'm going to go into trim. I got my program selected, and I'm going to go to my sample. There you are. I'm going to hit program mode, and this is it can be specific to the MPC 2500, but you're going to go into your chopping mode. I'm going to click on this pad that is currently empty, and that's the thing. I already have this program set up for this, so you'll see that it has kick on 1, snare on 2, and my hats I can pull up when I'm in program mode, and I can go and do minor adjustments to them, right? So I'm going to hit the first one where I have nothing assigned. I'm going to assign the first sample. Make sure it's on chop 0, right? So that now this plays the full sample, right? Now that it's playing the full sample, I'm going to hit this that says play and chop. Now, play and chop is a feature that's inside of the JJOS 3 that I have on this machine. Other versions of JJOS will not have a play and chop feature. You will need to go through and assign them. I'm just going to go through and use the play and chop so that I can get through this quicker, but I'll be going through the kind of chops that I'm looking for as well. So if you are doing more manual chops, you'll still be able to see what I'm looking for and like what I'm hearing, right? And so your process may not be able to do a real-time auto chop, but we're still going to be chopping. So I'm going to hit play and chop, and I'm going to chop these up. I'm then going to go to my second bank, go here, and because on this program I normally have a ride there, but I'm going to go back to the second sample now, and we're going to do the same process. Now, you might notice that I didn't just go to the next bank to keep chopping, and I just let this chop continue on. So it actually goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then to 8, and then I can kind of pick which ones I want to use. So now what I do is I have the basic chop, as I call it, right? And now that I have the basic chop, I'm going to go through back on A. Okay, and now that I have these chops, what I'm going to go through right now is zeroing in on certain notes. One, I want to make sure that I'm actually on the note. So I think it was like this one is not exactly on. That one, right? I need to move that one over. But I'm also going to be looking for certain notations. And I'm going to try and explain it after I do it. But what I want to do now is just go through and actually hit the notes and chop it and have you guys watch and listen to what I'm hearing and what I'm focusing on. And then we can analyze. Okay, so let's take a look at what I did here. On the first sample, what I obviously want kind of like the main hook, right? So I have the right. I kind of hear that nice doodaloo doot 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 doodaloo da boop da boop boop da, right? But then, if you were to imagine like this, I imagine kind of each pad to almost be able to play itself to a moment, but because you have 6 available, or more, depending on how you lay out your layout, you can then really change the melodies, right? So here, actually, I want to see I can bring out a little bit more. And even on something like this, I think I can tighten it up a little bit, bring it even a little bit closer. Now, if you guys notice, sometimes if you get to a certain chop, and I apologize for any clipping in these processes, but that's a part of finding nearing in. So sometimes if you do a chop at a larger note, you'll have like a clip, right, that's coming in. And what you want to do is once you really find the downbeat, which I'm going to do here. Yeah, that sounds good. I'm then going to zoom in as far as I can, right? Make this big, and you see how I'm actually on the wave note. So I want to scooch this bad boy right there to where the start is right in between. Hopefully you guys can see that on the screen, to where the start of the sample is actually right at the start of the next compression and rarefaction of the wave. So with that said, now we have some go-to samples, right? Now, I kind of zeroed in what I was thinking initially, but now what I do is I'm going to go ahead and do a basic jam, because at least from this point, since I'm a finger drummer, what I can now do is I can start kind of jamming around, and I'll play some drum beats while finding different tempos that I might want to try with the samples. And as I start experimenting, I might notice, oh, I actually want a sample in another position, or I might want a sample melody at a different point, right? And so I'm going to go through this process, and hopefully we'll get to see some of these moments in action. Okay. So right now I actually have a decent idea of maybe where I might want to go with this. I definitely like the, right, kind of the offbeat stutter. And then I get this is definitely going to be the main hook. Right, kind of having that kind of melody line. And you can see that now, even though I have this long line, I'm not necessarily using it every time. I might do. And I'll take different opportunities to hit melody spots to see what I might like for the overall vibe. And now, while I might have a basic boom bap to it, if I wanted to break this down now, let me see. I'm now going to try and say, oh, what other tempos or patterns might I be able to come up with? So let's see about that before we move on to the next sample. Now see, if I wanted to do a nice little breakdown, here would be an opportunity where I can play the full sample line of what I have here. And then the way I treat that downbeat is as kind of like an opener, right, for a drum kind of fill, right? So, doot, 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 top, babu, bagop, right, and then repeat. So these are different ways that you can now take your chops as we've gone from the full sample and we tempo changed it, tuned it, and then chopped it across these pads, refined kind of where I was looking for, and then started to jam. And here we already have a couple of options. But now let's go to our second one, because sometimes what ends up happening is you find out that the second one is where you really want to be. So let's go through the same process. So you know what I realized too, as a fun fact? So because this started off as a ride, I actually had it as a lower volume, which is why it was a lower volume. So now it should be more even. Yeah, that's better. That's much better. I'm not going to lie, I'm pretty happy with that. But now here's the thing. I guess if I'm thinking about it, so check it. Because as I'm thinking about it, these two are very similar. Now, this is an important difference for how you might want to make a beat. These two notes are very similar, but it's a different inflection and a different stress on the note. Right? It's kind of got that growl. When that one has more of a whine to it, right? And so these are really fundamentally similar notes. So I actually wouldn't need both if I wanted to choose one and keep it, which is what I would normally choose to do. If you wanted to change up the pattern and not have it always be one or the other, then you can use both still and use it as a change up in kind of like the overall feel of the vibe. But because I like to try and find a real hook and have it stay that way, I'm actually going to take one of these two and find another addition now that I can add into the play, right? So you'll see kind of how this works now. Do you guys notice that little thing? I want that end. Kind of that guitar. Beep, beep, beep. Right? And if you guys don't notice, and especially maybe because I've listened to a lot of swing music, that's a guitar that's in there, right? So if you can listen to it, it's actually doing a doot, 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 right? Playing those chords. And I want that. And if you can time that out now with a performance, we can maybe get something like this. Right, so you see how now we can add that in? I like that. Let's see now what we can add in now that we have the full thing, right? Right? You see how much fun we're having now with that? So now I can take all this. Now, of course, in this process, the first thing that I haven't even done something that I might have done already, but actually probably wouldn't have done if you've watched enough of my live videos, which is save. So now I definitely have a foundation to work off of. And this is where it becomes kind of my closing and how we go from here. To summarize, we went from having an original sample that is now down-tempoed, down-tuned, and then re-chopped so that that I have different downbeats and different melodies that I would want to focus on, right? And we start by getting the sample in there, tightening up that sample so that it'll be a little easier to find the tempo. Then we change the tempo and adjust what we want. Then we chop across our pads. And again, whether or not you want to just chop the sample in one program and lay that out on one track, and then you want to lay down the drums on a second track, is fine. The chopping process, though, I think is important because you can see that it's not always just about getting, at least for me, it's not always just about getting everything on the 1, 2, 3. Look at how everything jumps around. Like on the screen, my starts are not just on a one beat every single time, and I'm really looking to attain, certain melodies out of this, right? So it starts with a basic chop, followed by kind of a jam session, and then it allows me to then fine-tune where I might want to bring the song. Now, this is where I then would save, right? And, for the sake of timeliness, let me actually do that. But actually, before I do, I would save, and after I save, I will go take a break. Because now that I've had time to jam on it, and I have an idea, and I know that I have something worth working on, I take a little break, and then when I come back to it, oftentimes, and this might just be for me, I don't know if anyone else has had this before, but coming back with a refreshed mindset can actually bring out new ideas. Right? Oh, I didn't think to try this drum pattern. Oh, I didn't think about that one sample chop, and maybe I can focus a line on that. Oh, if I add in this percussion sound, I can make this breakdown. And these different thoughts will come through time. Any routine that you guys have ever seen me perform is never from the first jam session that I did with that beat. Right? It's oftentimes from me doing exactly what I did right here, and then I'll take a break and then revisit it. And maybe that's something I can do on the next tutorial, which is kind of a revisitation process on, hey, now that I'm refreshed and I'm coming at this with maybe a different perspective on a different day, what are the different thought processes that we can bring in here, right? But I thought that this would at least be very helpful to you. What I'm going to do is put the YouTube link of the sample in the description of the Patreon post. That way you guys can go and sample it yourself and try maybe a couple of things. One, you can try and replicate the process that I just did, or take what you take what you will from this and then apply it to maybe another part of the song that you hear something that maybe I didn't, right? And this is where we get to express ourselves in sampling music, right? So I hope you guys found this helpful. If there are any added questions that you might want me to go through or that you might want some extra clarity on, please go through it. But just to make sure that the drum sounds are already loaded from a program where I already have a basic setup already there. And I find that to be important because if this, I'm not just turning on my MPC and sampling in and then adding drum sounds, right? I skipped the whole process of where sometimes you see the producer adding in different sounds. What I often suggest to people, and I suggested this at the group session and anytime I'm teaching someone finger drumming, is if you take the time to set up a basic preset that is good for your flow, then you will save many hours in your life having to do the same thing over and over again, reloading samples and redoing stuff. So I have my basic preset where I have my drums, and then I have my my blank spots already picked out in a mute group. And then that way when I have the sample the way I want it to, I can assign it to the pad and get right to chopping. And there you go. So guys, get into it, have fun, stay nerdy. Like I said, the YouTube link will be in the description. Have fun, and let me see what you guys got.